"Stop right there, I'm calling 911. The words hit me like a siren before the siren even came. I turned from my garage door, halfway closed, to see her again. Karen Holbrook, president of the Silver Ridge Estates HOA, standing at the end of my driveway like she'd just caught a fugitive. Phone raised, lips trembling with outrage. "You're hiding something in there," she shouted. I saw the lights, the machines. "This is illegal activity." I just stared at her, still holding the garage remote in my hand. The hum of the door motor filled the silence between us. "Karen," I said evenly, "this is my home, and that's my garage." She didn't blink. "We'll see what the authorities think." As the wail of approaching sirens echoed through the cul-de-sac, I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled to myself. She had no idea who she'd just called the police on. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories that prove some people really picked the wrong fight. There's a reason I bought the corner lot with the maple tree that leans over the cul-de-sac like an old sentinel. On summer afternoons, the shadow lands squarely on my driveway and turns my garage into what it was always meant to be: a small, honest workshop where a man can take something broken and make it whole again. That's all I wanted from Silver Ridge Estates. Quiet shade, the smell of warm motor oil, and the simple satisfaction of setting a carburetor right. I didn't come here to make a point. I came here to disappear into ordinary life. Most mornings I'm up before dawn. 52 does that to you. The body wakes first. The mind follows at its own pace. I brew coffee, open the side door, and let the cool air roll over the concrete. The garage is where my world narrows in a way I like. Pegboard tools. A red steel box with drawers that sound like a reliable hymn when they slide. A '74 Norton Commando on the stand, polished by a dozen patient Saturdays. There's a radio with a bent antenna tuned to a classic rock station that goes to static whenever the blender in the kitchen kicks on. A life measured by small clicks and soft whirs. The neighborhood sells a different story. Silver Ridge brochures show families on bicycles and a golden retriever that seems union required. The houses wear tasteful tans and grays identical except for the porches where rocking chairs like sentries keep watch over very similar lives. The HOA rules, sorry guidelines, arrive in a binder thick enough to stop a small bullet. 2 approved mailbox designs, acceptable shrub heights, no commercial activity, and garage doors must remain open no longer than 15 minutes at a time, unless actively loading or unloading. I remember reading that last one thinking, who measures this? It didn't take long to find out. Karen Holbrook introduced herself on day 2. I was on a ladder cleaning the fan blades in the foyer when I heard a knock that believed in itself. When I opened the door, her smile was already arranged, the kind that suggests agreement is inevitable. She was mid-50s, hair sprayed into a helmet of meticulous significance, a cardigan, the color of sherbet, and a slim binder cradled like a newborn. Her nameplate read President, because of course it did. "Welcome to Silver Ridge," she chirped. "We value neighbors who value standards." I told her I did generally. She congratulated me on buying in during a competitive season, a phrase that sounded like a warning. Then she thumbed the binder open and ran a manicured finger down a page, until it arrived with a practice flourish at 14.3b, exterior work visibility. "I see you have some equipment in the garage," she said, like she was spotting contraband. "It's a beautiful space. We simply ask that resident projects remain tidy." She paused over that word, tasting it. "And private. We don't want to inspire copycats. I promised I wouldn't corrupt the block with adjustable wrenches and honest sweat." She laughed a musical trill with sharp edges. When she left, I noticed she'd slipped a glossy pamphlet into the crack of the door, "Keep Silver Ridge Safe." On the back was a list of phone numbers, including hers in bold report issues, 24/7, and the non-emergency line for the local police. The first number was circled in pink highlighter. The first month passed in small frictions. A yellow note appeared after I watered the lawn at noon. Best practice is before 9 a.m. or after 6 p.m. Sun waste. Another note for a garden hose visible from the street. Another about my trash can lid not fully closed. Each one was signed with a looped K that managed to look cheerful and accusatory at once. I taped the notes above the workbench like a growing collection of miniature warrants. It amused me at first, this pageantry of control, but the novelty thinned with each new slip. "What did you do to her?" asked my neighbor Lila during a Saturday block yard sale. She and her husband Ken had a table of baby clothes and a sign that read, "Everything must go," which felt ominous for a marriage, but apparently referred only to onesies. I closed my garage, I said. Ah, she winced. You're one of those. One of what men who like doors. She says doors send messages. What kind of messages that you have something to hide, Ken said, appearing with a box of plastic dinosaurs that had survived biblical floods. In this zip code, privacy is suspicious. We laughed, but not long. Silver Ridge trained you to speak quickly in public like a ship's crew under watch. People here smiled the way you smile with a hand on your car horn. It's not a threat. It's a readiness. I learned the rhythms of the HOA, the way you learn the squeak of a floorboard in a new house. Monday mornings, Karen jogged the loop in pastel leggings, pausing to photograph unmotivated grass. Wednesday nights were for board meetings at the clubhouse, light refreshments and heavy sighs. Friday afternoons, she sat on the bench under the maple with an iPad tapping notes, like she was composing an aria titled Order. She loved the word, order. It was the wax stamp on her letters, the text on her tote, the sign on her office door, order is kindness. I had a different definition. Still, I can be civilized. I waved when we crossed paths. I nodded when the newsletter praised vigilant leadership. I trimmed the boxwoods just enough to satisfy someone who believed greenery had moral implications. I kept my radio low. I logged work hours that began after 8 and ended before 6, staged for the theater of neighborhood goodwill. I did all of it not because I feared enforcement, but because I was trying an experiment. What if just once I let ordinary life happen to me? Even so, the notes escalated. The font grew bolder. The language turned from suggestions to citations. One morning, I found an envelope taped to the garage, a formal notice of violation with 3 boxes checked noise unapproved activity safety concern. Attached was a quote from Section 9.2. No resident shall operate or appear to operate a business from the garage or premises. Beneath that, a photo of me hunched over the garage door halfway down to keep the glare off the chrome. A caption in Karen's handwriting, visible work, suggests commerce. I took the notice to my neighbor across the street, Priya, who had a lawyer's posture and a gardener's hands. She read it mouth, a flat line. This is bluster, she said. A garage isn't a storefront because a human stands in it. Keep the door where you want it. Tell that to the president, I said. I have. She quotes scripture from the bylaws and calls it law. Priya looked at my face and softened. If you need me at a meeting, I'll come. There's a move people learn when they want to control you. They force you to explain yourself. Every conversation becomes a deposition you're destined to lose because you refuse to dignify the premise. When Karen stopped me one evening, timing her jog to intercept me at the mailbox, she led with that move. What is it you do in there? She asked without greeting, nodding toward the garage. Fix things, I said. Fix what metal? Mistakes. Time. She frowned like I'd answered in riddles to evade a lie. Are you licensed for fixing time? No. You think this is funny. I think it's a garage. She lifted her phone, a reflex by now, and snapped a photo of my face. Documentation, she said, the word landing with the smugness of a neophyte. Residents have a right to feel safe. They do, I said, and they have a right not to be harassed. Her smile turned sharp. Harassment is a legal term. So is trespass. That night, the newsletter arrived in inboxes with a new initiative, Neighborhood Watch. 2, a call for vigilance against garage-based activity that may undermine property values. Under it, a stock photo of a wrench laid over caution tape. Subtlety was not a tool the president kept in her belt. I tell you this not to paint myself a hero. Heroes are loud, and loud is easy. I'm a quiet man with an old radio who likes bolts organized by size. I've spent years learning to live inside patience, to hear the sound a room makes before someone lies in it. Silver Ridge was supposed to be a break, but breaks are fragile. They split wherever pressure finds them. Pressure found me 3 ways at once: the notes, the newsletter, and the looks. Not everyone gave them. Most of my neighbors have better sense, but the few who did glanced at my garage like it was a rumor with a roof. A young mom steered her stroller a foot farther from my drive. A teenage boy filming for a class project panned over the door and whispered, "That's the guy." The smallest slights do the deepest work. They turn you foreign to the place you pay for. I called the number on the pamphlet, once the non-emergency line. I asked a board dispatcher what constituted illegal garage use. As long as you're not running a chop shop, she said, you're fine. Define chop shop. You would know if you were running one. I'm not. Then you're not. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't want permission. I wanted sanity. On the Thursday before the sirens, I left the garage door down for 20 minutes. It was raining, the kind of persistent drizzle that makes sidewalks reflective and dishonest. I was soldering a wire harness and needed the humidity low and the temperature steady. When I finally hit the button to open up, the maple had gathered 1,000 points of light on its leaves, and Karen was standing under it with a phone filming my door as it rose. We held each other's eyes the way fencers touch blades. "I timed it," she said. "I hope you beat your personal best," I said. "It was 20 minutes. 15 is a guideline," I said, "not a curfew. Rules are rules, so is gravity." Still, we jump. Her jaw flexed. Some of us care about standards. Some of us care about lives. I shouldn't have said it, not because it wasn't true, but because she didn't come here for truth. She came for victory, and I'd handed her a provocation masquerading as poetry. She walked off, fingers already flying over the screen. I went back to the bench and stared at the solder cooling into a shiny scar. You learn to read people by how they process defeat. Karen's processing style was escalation. That night I laid out parts on a clean towel like a surgeon, staging a second chance, and told myself, "Don't react. The universe has its own calendar. If someone insists on meeting the law head first, you don't push them, you step aside." In the morning I brewed coffee, opened the side door, and watched steam rise like a small forecast over the mug. The Norton caught the light through the window and looked briefly like it wanted to be new again. I smiled at the thought and pressed the remote. The garage door came down with its steady hum. In the narrow slit of bright that remained, I saw a silhouette at the end of the driveway, a woman with a phone and a grievance already rehearsing her lines. The door settled. The world clicked into a different chapter. By nightfall, the binder would come out. The notes would turn into threats. And the words that opened this story would rip the air again, louder this time, because now there would be an audience. But in that quiet moment, just me, the coffee, and the last inch of daylight, I did what I always do when a storm decides it loves me. I took a breath, measured the space between impulse and action, and chose to be ordinary for one more minute. It wouldn't last. People like Karen don't permit ordinary. They mistake calm for confession. They mistake doors for secrets. They mistake a man repairing something for a man preparing something. And when they make enough mistakes, something else wakes up in me, not anger, not pride, just the old trained patience of a person who knows what to do when someone points at a garage and says the word illegal like it's a spell. This is how the madness began, with a binder, a stopwatch, and a woman determined to turn peace into a performance. And it is how it will end, in a room with better lights, better rules, and a different kind of door. It started on a Saturday morning, so ordinary it could have been copied from any suburban postcard, until it wasn't. The sun was still low-hanging like a tired coin over the rooftops, and the air smelled of wet asphalt from the sprinklers that had finished their chore. I had the garage open, halfway radio humming through an old Fleetwood Mac track, when I heard the sound that always meant trouble in Silver Ridge, the sharp, deliberate click of high heels on concrete. Karen Holbrook was marching up my driveway again, binder tucked under one arm, phone in the other. She looked like a lawyer on her way to prosecute a garden gnome. Her sunglasses were large enough to double as riot shields, and her mouth wore that thin line that said she was one sentence away from a complaint. I didn't even look up at first. I'd learned that acknowledging her too soon only fed the drama. But Karen didn't believe in subtle entrances. She cleared her throat with the power of a public address system. "Mr. Cole," she began, "you were informed about the garage use restrictions last month. Section 9.2. "Yes, Karen, I remember. And yet here you are again, with the door half closed." "It's sunny," I said. "Chrome and sunlight don't mix." She took a photo. "I'm documenting this. There have been reports, credible reports, of suspicious activity coming from your property." I laughed quietly. "Suspicious activity? You mean engines?" She stiffened. "You know what I mean. People saw strangers visiting late at night." "UPS," I offered. "Or maybe raccoons." Karen's jaw set like drying cement. "If you won't take this seriously, I'll have to escalate. We can't risk someone operating unlicensed business or other things." "Other things," I repeated. "You mean terrorism, arms dealing, counterfeit lemonade." Her lips twitched, but not into a smile. She raised her phone higher. "Step back from the garage, please. I need to record this properly." "Karen," I said, "you're filming a man fixing a carburetor. You don't need a warrant or a witness. You need a hobby." That was the wrong move. Her nostrils flared, her finger hovered dramatically over the phone screen, and then came the line that detonated the piece of Silver Ridge Estates. "Stop right there, I'm calling 911. I froze, more out of disbelief than fear. "You're calling the police because I closed my garage." "I'm calling," she declared, "because you're acting hostile and possibly armed." "Armed," I repeated slowly. "With a wrench. I saw metallic objects," she insisted. "And you raised your voice." "I haven't raised my voice," I said softly. Not yet. But she was already talking to dispatch, pacing in tight circles like an actor rehearsing a scene. Yes, hello, this is Karen Holbrook, HOA president of Silver Ridge Estates. We have a male resident barricaded inside his garage. Possible weapons. Acting erratic. I almost laughed out loud at the word barricaded. The door was half open, sunlight pouring in like a spotlight. She had the subtlety of a fire alarm. Ma'am, I heard the dispatcher reply faintly, is he threatening you? Not directly, but I feel unsafe. He's glaring. I'm squinting, I said helpfully. She ignored me. Yes, please send someone quickly. We have children here. I sighed, grabbed my mug of coffee, and leaned against the workbench. Somewhere between the absurdity and the caffeine, I found calm amusement. I'd been through bigger storms than Karen Holbrook's imagination. When you've spent decades in federal service, listening to real emergencies, negotiating with people who truly meant harm, you learn to measure danger by silence, not volume. And Karen was pure volume. The distant wail of sirens began about 5 minutes later, slicing through the calm morning like an unwanted soundtrack. Within moments, 2 police SUVs turned into the cul-de-sac, lights flashing. Curtains fluttered across windows as the neighborhood tuned in to the latest HOA drama episode, live and free of charge. Karen waved frantically at the approaching vehicles, pointing toward me like she'd just identified a national threat. That's him, she cried. He's the one. Don't let him close that door. I took another sip of coffee and pressed the button. The garage door slid down smoothly until only a foot of daylight remained. I heard Karen gasp as if I detonated something. The officers approached cautiously, hands near their belts but not yet drawn. One of them, a younger man with a polite expression, called out, "Sir, can you step outside, please?" Of course, I said. I lifted the door the rest of the way and stepped into the light mug still in hand. Karen practically dove behind one of the police cars. "Be careful, he's unpredictable." The officer glanced at me, then at her, then back at me. I could see the question already forming behind his eyes. Is this real or is this Tuesday in an HOA? "Sir," he said carefully, "we got a call about a barricade situation." I smiled. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only thing barricaded here is a faulty carburetor." The other officer, older, and with the kind of posture that said he'd seen every flavor of nonsense, peered into the garage. "Looks like a normal setup," he said. "Tools, bike, coffee. No hostages." Karen stepped forward again, visibly offended. "Of course you'd say that. He probably hid everything before you arrived. Look at his demeanor, cold, evasive, trained." The older cop raised an eyebrow. "Trained at what, something military, maybe? I can tell. He's too calm." "Ma'am," he said, "you realize calm isn't a crime. It should be when it's suspicious." The younger officer bit his lip to keep from laughing. "Do you have any evidence of illegal activity?" Karen hesitated, which was rare for her. "I heard noises. Mechanical. At night. That's—" "What garages do?" he said. She flushed. "This neighborhood has standards. There are bylaws. Bylaws aren't laws," I offered. "Stay out of this," she snapped. "Trying to," I said. The older cop stepped between us. "All right, let's dial this down. Sir, can we just see some ID for our report?" "Sure." I reached into my wallet and handed over my driver's license. He looked at it, then at me. I could tell he recognized the name, but wasn't sure why. "I appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Cole. We'll file this as a false alarm." Karen's voice rose an octave. "False? Are you saying I fabricated a crime?" "I'm saying there isn't one. I demand you investigate further. Search his property." The younger officer's patience was thinning. "Ma'am, without probable cause, we can't just—" "I am probable cause," she yelled. "I'm the HOA president." I nearly choked on my coffee. "That's not a federal title, Karen." "Enough from you," she snapped. "You think you're untouchable, don't you? Well, I'll find out who you really are." That line stuck with me. "I'll find out who you really are." The way she said it, like she was promising vengeance rather than curiosity, hit a chord I hadn't heard in years. It reminded me of interrogations where the suspect said too much without realizing it. There was something behind her obsession, something beyond control or gossip. The officers left after issuing her a warning about false emergency calls. Karen stood in the street, shaking furious eyes, burning holes into my garage door as it lowered again. I finished my coffee and looked at her through the narrow gap as the door met the concrete. For a moment her expression shifted, not anger but fear. Not of me, but of something older. The kind of fear you only see in people who know exactly what they're capable of. When the sirens faded and the neighbors retreated into their curated normalcy, I sat down on my stool, elbows on my knees. My reflection in the metal door looked like a man who'd lost count of second chances. I'd promised myself not to bring work home, not this version of work. But Karen's words echoed through the quiet, "I'll find out who you really are." What she didn't know was that curiosity is contagious. So I opened my laptop, typed her name into the federal database, not the public one, the one with layers the average citizen never sees, and waited for the wheel to spin. The file came up almost blank. Too blank. Her background check was scrubbed cleaner than a politician's biography. No employment records before 2009, no property ownership before Silver Ridge, no aliases, no traffic tickets. Perfect. And in my world, perfect is impossible. I leaned back, fingers steepled, the old instinct creeping in like an uninvited friend. Files like that don't appear naturally, they're made, which meant someone had cleaned her record. And people who get their records cleaned have something to hide. The garage, the notes, the call, all of it suddenly felt smaller, like noise hiding a signal. I wasn't dealing with a meddling neighbor anymore. I was dealing with someone who'd spent her life pretending to be ordinary. And I knew exactly how to find out why. That night, as Silver Ridge slept under its perfectly spaced streetlights, I drafted an email to a trusted contact in D.C., someone who still owed me a favor. I kept it short, need a deep pull on a Karen Holbrook, Silver Ridge Estates. Possible alias. Start with sealed state records early 2000s. Then I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let the radio hum. Karen thought she'd called the cops on a stranger. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the Federal Bureau of Investigation. When you've spent a lifetime tracking liars, you develop a sixth sense for the ones trying hardest to look clean. That was Karen Holbrook. Every inch of her life in Silver Ridge screamed perfection, the pastel house, the manicured roses that somehow bloomed out of season, the way her mail never sat in the box for more than 20 minutes. Everything too polished, too rehearsed. But the blankness in her official record, that was the real giveaway. People like her don't live spotless lives. They just hire better janitors. I didn't want to pull that thread at first. I had come here to retire, not to reopen old habits. But something about her, the aggression, the paranoia, the need to control everyone around her, felt familiar. I'd seen it before behind two-way glass when people with buried histories got a taste of power. HOA bylaws were just her new badge. And when she called 911 on me, that badge became a weapon. 2 days after the barricade incident, my contact from D.C., Agent Harper, pinged me through an encrypted channel. Harper and I went way back to my counter-organized crime days, sharp mind, sharper instincts, and absolutely no patience for nonsense. "Harper pulled your Karen." Weird file. State ID exists, but pre-2009 there's a sealed record flagged by the DOJ Privacy Act. I'd need clearance from above your old pay grade to unseal it. M.E. That's funny. Above my old pay grade would be me, Harper. Exactly. Want me to nudge the archives? M.E. Do it. And look for prior aliases. This smells like identity laundering. Harper, roger that. I'll dig through the weeds. I smiled at the screen. It felt like muscle memory coming back, quiet investigation, reading between redacted lines. Except now the suspect wasn't a mob accountant or a cyber ring. It was the woman sending HOA violation letters over trash bin placement. That night I sat in my dim garage laptop, casting a pale glow over the Norton's chrome tank. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the ceiling fan and the cicadas outside. I opened my email again and scrolled through old bureau access codes, fingers hesitating over the keyboard like a priest about to break a seal. Retired or not, I still had director-level clearance. I typed in the string of authorizations, exhaled, and pressed enter. The system resisted, then unlocked. What appeared wasn't a clean dossier, but a fractured one, like someone had taken scissors to a newspaper and taped the safe words back together. Name: Kara Lee Holman. DOB, redacted criminal history. Classified under State Rehabilitation Program 2003 notations. Violent offense, dismissed due to procedural error. Affiliations under investigation for financial fraud, 2006. Charges dropped. Notes subject relocated under sealed identity protection order, reason undisclosed. I leaned closer. Identity protection orders are reserved for two types of people: key witnesses or dangerous manipulators who cut deals to save themselves. Judging by Karen's new life running a suburban HOA like a personal dictatorship, I was betting on the latter. The next entry chilled me more than I expected. 2003, Baton Rouge Police Department. Incident: aggravated assault in connection with hate-motivated altercation at Miller's Bar. 3 hospitalized. 1 weapon recovered. Suspect: Kara Holman. Outcome sealed by state court. Expunged after 24 months. I sat back. My garage suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Karen, the woman fining people for garden gnomes, once swung fists in a hate-fueled bar brawl. People don't change like that. They adapt, refine disguise. Her HOA presidency wasn't civic duty, it was control therapy. I took notes. A pattern was emerging. 2003 assault. 2006 fraud, both sealed. A new identity in 2009. Then a perfect neighborhood in 2014. Every few years a reset. That wasn't random. That was a system. Somebody high up had helped her bury that past. And that meant leverage. The next morning I met my neighbor Priya on her porch. She was trimming rose bushes, her hands gloved, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. "Big excitement last weekend," she said. "You're a local celebrity now, not the kind of fame I wanted," I said. "She's been bragging about it, telling everyone she caught a criminal in the act." "Did she mention the part where the police apologized to me?" "Does Karen ever mention apologies?" I hesitated, then asked, "How long's she been president?" 5 years. Won the vote after the last guy moved out. "She's persistent. Scared 3 candidates off before the election." "Why?" "I'm trying to understand her history." Priya snorted. "History? She doesn't have one. Or that's what she says. Moved here from up north after a divorce. No kids, no records, no relatives. The kind of person who arrives one day fully formed like a bad idea. That confirmed it. Karen's story wasn't built, it was manufactured. That night Harper called. "You were right," he said without preamble. "She's not just Karen Holbrook. That's an alias tied to a suspended nonprofit Sunline Community Initiative, flagged for suspicious transfers 6 years ago. Guess who signed those checks? Let me guess. Karen. Bingo. She funneled HOA funds into the nonprofit, then the nonprofit paid shell contractors that never existed. Classic laundering loop. Small scale, but efficient. Amount about 120 grand. Enough to matter." Harper paused. "There's more. Her brother Stephen Holman popped up in a racketeering case in Arizona, member of the Ridgewell Order." I frowned. That hate group, still active. "And guess who posted bail for him back in 2005, the silence answered. When I hung up, I realized the weight of what I was holding. This wasn't HOA drama anymore. It was a ghost operation hidden in plain sight, run by a woman who used neighborhood bureaucracy to launder money and control perception, and she'd picked me as her next scapegoat. The next day, I attended the monthly HOA meeting for the first time. Karen was at the head of the long oak table framed by an American flag and a vase of artificial lilies. Her binder sat open like a Bible. "Oh, Mr. Cole," she said, voice sweet as corn syrup. "How brave of you to show up after last week's incident." "Just here to learn," I said. "I like knowing how justice works around here." Her smile tightened. "Justice, we prefer order." The meeting rolled on with reports about landscaping pool schedules and naturally ongoing safety concerns regarding unauthorized garage activity. Each line she spoke dripped with theater, but I wasn't listening for content. I was watching reactions. Several board members shifted uneasily when she mentioned budgets, especially when she referenced community improvement grants. One man at the end, Leonard, avoided her gaze entirely. Afterward, I caught him in the hallway. "How long's she been handling the finances?" He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Since before I joined. She says transparency is handled internally. But I've never seen a ledger. She does it all herself." "You ever asked to see one?" once he said. "She threatened to fine my daughter for leaving a scooter on the sidewalk." Classic intimidation loop. I'd seen cartels use softer versions of the same tactic, make the punishment personal, keep people compliant. I thanked Leonard and left mind buzzing. The pattern was clear: control the rules, control the fear, control the money. But something else bothered me. The photo from the 2003 assault report, Harper had sent a grainy black and white shot of a woman half a lifetime younger. The face was the same, but the eyes, those eyes were wild, unhinged. The same eyes that glared at me when she screamed. Stop right there. She hadn't changed at all. She just found a legal outlet for her violence. Later that night, as rain began to tap softly against the window, I organized the data. Fraud, assault, laundering, identity, change, hate group ties. Enough to bury a career if she ever had one left. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted exposure. Clean, factual, irrefutable exposure. The kind that doesn't scream it, simply speaks truth and watches the world rearrange itself. so I planned the next move. I would build a trail she couldn't deny: every transaction, every falsified grant, every HOA dollar misused. I'd request copies of community invoices through the transparency clause buried in the bylaws she worshipped so much. I'd trace them to the dummy corporation Harper found, and then when the board saw it with their own eyes, she wouldn't be able to scream harassment or misogyny or misunderstanding. The law would speak louder than her voice ever could. I leaned back, the Norton gleaming beside me. Funny thing about garages, they're where people fix what's broken. Karen thought she was the law here. She had no idea she'd picked a fight with the man who used to write the laws she broke. And as the rain turned into a steady drumbeat, I whispered to the silence, "Let's see what you're hiding, Madam President." Because if she'd spent her life erasing her past, I was about to become the one person she couldn't erase. There's a certain pleasure in letting your opponent dig their own hole. You don't have to push, just clear the weeds around it and wait for gravity. That's exactly what I did with Karen Holbrook. She was too arrogant to imagine anyone could out-bureaucrat her, and arrogance is the most predictable flaw in the human catalog. The day after I uncovered her past, I spent the morning studying the HOA bylaws she adored. Each page was a symphony of half-legal nonsense, written by people who thought reading a contract once made them attorneys. Buried in section 12.4 was a beautiful little instrument of self-destruction. All members may request access to association expenditure records with 72-hour notice. Karen quoted bylaws like scripture, which meant she couldn't object without contradicting her own faith. I drafted a polite email. "Dear President Holbrook, in the spirit of transparency, I'd like to review the past 2 years of HOA financial records. I'm sure you'll agree this demonstrates our shared commitment to order. Warm regards, Daniel Cole." Within 15 minutes, she replied, "Mr. Cole, your tone is noted. Records are available upon written request at the next scheduled meeting. KH." The phrase "your tone is noted" was her passive-aggressive trademark. I almost laughed. People like Karen mistake politeness for weakness. They don't realize it's the sound of the fuse burning quietly. 3 days later, I arrived at the clubhouse with a leather folder under my arm and a small recording device clipped discreetly inside my jacket. I wasn't there as an FBI director. I was there as a bored neighbor who just happened to know how to build a case file that could end a career. The room smelled of coffee and fresh anxiety. Karen sat behind a folding table with 2 board members, Leonard, and a timid woman named Ruth. A stack of binders sat neatly beside her. "Mr. Cole," she said sweetly, "I trust this is about putting our little misunderstanding behind us." "Exactly," I said, smiling. "I just want to understand where my dues go. I'm sure everything's in perfect order." Her eyes narrowed. "Of course. Silver Ridge maintains impeccable records." She slid a binder across the table. Inside, receipts and invoices were arranged with almost artistic precision. Landscaping contracts, maintenance bills, community event expenses, all properly dated. Too properly. If you've ever handled forged documents, you know the smell of fresh toner and unaged paper. Half of these pages looked like they were printed yesterday. The ink hadn't even faded where it should have. "Impressive," I said, flipping through. "You keep backups." She tensed. "Naturally. Off-site. Mind if I make some copies for my notes?" "That won't be necessary," she said quickly. "These are internal documents. Under 12.4, I believe members are entitled to duplicates." Her jaw tightened. "You've read the bylaws." "I like literature," I said. The moment stretched. Leonard coughed. Ruth pretended to check her phone. Karen smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll prepare summaries," she said finally. "We wouldn't want confusion from misinterpreting technical data." "Of course," I said. "Numbers can be tricky." I left the meeting with nothing physical, but everything I needed: her nervous tone, the evasions, the sudden decision to rewrite transparency into censorship. Every lie she told would soon serve as its own affidavit. That evening, I met Harper online. We cross-referenced the vendor names from the binder against federal tax databases. Out of the 11 listed contractors, 5 didn't exist. 3 were registered to a P.O. box in Arizona, the same town where her brother's company operated. 1 matched the Shell landscaping business tied to the Ridgewell order investigation. "Classic layering," Harper muttered. "She's routing HOA money through fake invoices, washing it in her brother's firm, then funneling it into the Ridgewell fund. Small potatoes, but criminal all the same. Can you trace the transfers? Already on it." "Give me a week." I didn't have a week. Karen was escalating again. The next morning, I found another envelope taped to my garage. Violation notice. Non-compliance with conduct standards. Below in red ink, harassment of HOA president. She'd filed a complaint accusing me of intimidation during the records meeting. It was almost beautiful, the audacity, the self-incrimination. I kept the notice, dated it, and smiled. That night I began building the trap. The plan was simple. Karen needed to believe she'd caught me breaking a rule, so she'd rush to document it on camera as usual. Once she crossed the line into trespassing or illegal surveillance, I'd have physical proof for the sheriff and my internal task force. And if she'd tampered with HOA funds, her reaction under pressure would open the final door to prosecution. I started by baiting her curiosity. I parked my pickup half inside the garage, half outside, with a stack of blank boxes marked property files on the workbench. On top, I placed a USB drive labeled Grant Reports, a harmless decoy containing only one file, a document titled Audit Summary, Sunline Community Initiative. Inside it, an invisible digital tracker that would ping Harper's server the moment anyone copied it. Then I waited. By noon, the next day, Karen was there, standing at the edge of my driveway, pretending to photograph flowers. I pretended not to notice. She lingered, pacing, glancing toward the open garage. Eventually, she left. That night, Harper called. We got a ping. Someone copied the decoy file at 6:17 p.m. from an IP registered to the Silver Ridge HOA office. Got her, I said. Careful, Harper warned. She's volatile. Don't push too fast. I'm not pushing. I'm inviting gravity. 2 days later, she snapped. I was sanding a piece of maple in the driveway when her white Lexus screeched to a stop. She jumped out waving papers. You think you're clever, don't you? She shouted. Planting false documents to frame me. Good afternoon, Karen, I said, brushing sawdust from my shirt. That's a serious accusation. I know you hacked HOA files. I don't have access to HOA files, I said calmly. You do. She froze for half a second, long enough. Why would you assume I have your files unless you looked at mine? Her face flushed. You're manipulating this community. You mean auditing. You're dangerous, she shrieked, grabbing her phone again. I'm calling 911, I sighed. Again. This time, I didn't bother stopping her. I wanted witnesses. When the officers arrived, I greeted them with coffee and the recording of her last visit. One of them, Officer Lane, recognized me from bureau briefings years ago. He gave a subtle nod that said, I know who you are. I'll play along. Everything okay here? Lane asked. I believe Miss Holbrook is upset, I said. She's accused me of hacking the HOA system. Perhaps she can explain how she found data from my computer on her device. Karen blinked. What? No, I didn't, he's twisting. Do you have the device, ma'am? Lane asked. Yes, but those are fabricated files. Then you won't mind if we take a look, he said, extending his hand. Her confidence collapsed like wet cardboard. This is harassment, she hissed. Ma'am, he said gently, hand over the device. She did. Within minutes, the tracker verified itself. Harper confirmed remotely. Her phone had accessed the decoy USB and transmitted the data to her office computer. Chain of custody timestamped. Exactly what I needed. Karen's voice trembled. You set me up. No, I said quietly. You set yourself up. I just gave you the opportunity. She backed away, eyes darting toward the officers. He's dangerous, she whispered. He's not who he says he is. Lane looked at me, then back at her. Ma'am, do you know who he is? No, she snapped. Some mechanic pretending to be ma'am, he interrupted, tone shifting. I'd recommend you stop talking. She frowned, confused. Why? Because I do know who he is. For the first time since I'd moved into Silver Ridge, Karen Holbrook looked uncertain. The officers left with her phone for evidence. She drove off a few minutes later, pale and shaking. That evening, Harper called again. We followed the trail. The HOA's account fed directly into the Sunline Fund, then into 3 personal checking accounts under her alias. It's airtight. Good, I said. How soon can we move? Tomorrow morning. Local and federal warrants. I looked around my quiet garage, the Norton, the tools, the fading smell of coffee. It felt like a chapel before a storm. Let's end this cleanly, I said. Any regrets? Harper asked. Only that it took me this long to start. The next morning, the cul-de-sac woke to the sound of unmarked cars. Agents in windbreakers moved with the precision of a well-oiled clock. Karen stepped onto her porch and her pink blazer eyes wide. When they read her rights, she tried to shout about HOA sovereignty bylaws and conspiracies. No one listened. Neighbors peeked from curtains, their mouths open. For once, Silver Ridge was silent. As they placed her in the car, she met my eyes across the street. There was no anger this time, only recognition, the kind you see when a predator finally realizes its prey. I raised my coffee cup in a small salute. You wanted order, I said softly. Now you'll have it. The door shut, the car rolled away, and for the first time since I'd moved here, I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. Silence. The morning after Karen Holbrook's arrest, Silver Ridge Estates looked like a movie set after the crew had left. The lawns were too perfect, the air too still, and every open window hummed with whispers. People didn't mow that day, they stared. The HOA president, the woman who fined children for sidewalk chalk and cited retirees for wind chimes, had been handcuffed on her own porch at sunrise. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like paperwork waiting to happen. I spent that morning the way I always do when the storm passes, organizing the facts before emotion has time to grow claws. The file on my desk was thick now: falsified invoices, financial trails, the sealed criminal history, and Harper's verified chain of custody from the tracker. The federal warrants were executed cleanly with minimal noise. She was being held at the county detention center pending fraud and identity theft charges. Still, I knew the storm wasn't over. When corruption hides in plain sight, exposure doesn't end it, it wakes it up. By noon, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I wasn't surprised. Panic always arrives in minutes when power disappears. The clubhouse smelled of old coffee and guilt. About 30 residents filled the folding chairs, their faces pale and confused. Leonard sat near the front, clutching a folder like a life vest. Ruth wrung her hands, whispering prayers. At the front of the room, the vice president, a man named Harold Bishop, tried to maintain order. "Everyone, please," he said, voice trembling. "We'll begin shortly. Let's keep this professional." Professional. The word had lost meaning in this place. When I stepped inside, conversations froze. Someone whispered my name like I was part myth, part grenade. I nodded politely, took a seat in the back, and waited. Harold cleared his throat. "As you all know, President Holbrook has been temporarily detained pending investigation into certain, financial irregularities." Temporarily, a woman near the front snapped. They took her away in handcuffs. Harold blinked rapidly. "Let's not rush to judgment. We don't have all the facts." "We have the video," another man shouted, holding up his phone. "It's all over the neighborhood page." "FBI agents, federal warrants. You think that's a misunderstanding?" The room buzzed. I could feel the heat rising. Harold raised his palms. "Please, we'll address the facts once they're verified. In the meantime, we have a guest who can help clarify certain matters." All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly. "Afternoon, everyone. My name's Daniel Cole. I live on Maple Court. Until last week, most of you probably knew me as the garage guy." A few nervous laughs scattered across the room. Turns out that garage was more useful than anyone realized. I walked to the front, opened my folder, and placed several pages on the projector stand. The screen behind me glowed to life with spreadsheets and dates. "These are the financial transfers from your HOA account over the past 3 years," I said. Roughly $120,000 in community funds were redirected through a nonprofit called Sunline Community Initiative, a company with no employees, no physical address, and no service history. That nonprofit, in turn, sent payments to a landscaping firm registered to Stephen Holman, Karen's brother. A murmur rippled through the room. Every dollar was disguised as maintenance tree trimming playground upgrades. None of those projects ever happened. I tapped the next slide. "You all paid for them." Harold swallowed hard. "Mr. Cole, how did you get this information?" "Let's just say I have some experience in investigations," I replied. Someone in the back stood up. "So she was stealing from us all this time?" "Yes," I said. "And she was doing it under a false name. Her real identity is Kara Holman. She has a sealed record for aggravated assault, prior fraud charges, and confirmed ties to a hate group investigated for financial crimes in 2006. That's public record now." The seals were lifted this morning. The room erupted. Shock, anger, disbelief, every flavor of betrayal poured into the air at once. "She fined me for painting my fence beige," a man shouted. "She made me replant my garden because the tulips were the wrong color," cried another. "She told me my disabled son's wheelchair ramp was a violation," a woman sobbed. I waited until the noise died down. "I know," I said quietly. "She did a lot worse to others. But what matters now is that you all know the truth. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Leonard rose shakily from his chair. "Mr. Cole, are you with the police?" I hesitated, then decided it was time. "Not exactly," I said. "I'm the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The silence that followed could have rewritten physics. Mouths hung open. Someone actually dropped a pen that hit the floor like a gunshot. Harold blinked. "The FBI." "Yes," I said. "I moved here to retire quietly. Didn't expect to find federal-level corruption in a cul-de-sac." The laughter that followed wasn't humor, it was relief. the kind that bursts out after months of being held hostage by fear. Ruth stood up, voice trembling. So she was. One of them. A criminal. Not anymore, I said. Now she's a case file. After the meeting, people swarmed me with questions. Some cried, others apologized for believing her stories. A few were angry at themselves for staying silent. I told them what I tell victims in every case. Silence isn't weakness. It's survival until the truth has a witness. By evening, local news vans lined the street. A reporter shouted, "Director Cole, can you confirm the charges?" "I can confirm that the law applies to everyone," I said, "even those who hide behind homeowners' bylaws." The clip aired that night. By morning, HOA president linked to fraud and hate group was trending across social media. Silver Ridge had officially gone viral. But for me, the work wasn't done. Harper called from DC. "She's talking," he said, "trying to cut a deal, claims she was laundering for someone higher up." "There's always someone higher up," I said. "Track it." "You realize you just became the most famous man in suburban America. I'd rather be anonymous." He chuckled. "Too late. You're a meme now," I sighed. "Fantastic." That weekend, the HOA board held another meeting, this one open air under the gazebo. It felt symbolic, sunlight replacing secrecy. Harold stepped down as acting president, citing emotional exhaustion. The board voted unanimously to dissolve the current leadership and start fresh. When they asked me to run, I laughed. "Trust me," I said. "You don't want a federal agent managing your block party." Instead, they elected Priya. She accepted with a humble smile and immediately proposed reforms: public financial transparency, fair complaint systems, limits on presidential power. The crowd cheered. For the first time, Silver Ridge felt like a neighborhood again. As the meeting ended, Priya approached me. She said, "You could have left it alone. Moved away. Let her destroy herself." "I could have," I said. "But corruption only destroys itself if someone shines the light long enough." She smiled softly. "You'll stay." "For a while," I said. "Someone has to make sure the lights stay on." Later that evening, I sat in my garage, the same one that started all this. The Norton's tank gleamed under the single hanging bulb. The air smelled of oil and pine shavings. Peace at last had a sound again. I opened the window. The night was cool, the street quiet. Across the cul-de-sac, kids rode scooters, their laughter echoing where Karen's voice used to bark orders. Someone was grilling steak. Somewhere, a dog barked, not in alarm, but because it could. On my workbench lay the final copy of the HOA file, stamped and sealed by the Bureau. I'd add it to the archives next week, another case closed, another ghost unmasked. Before I shut down the lights, I poured one last cup of coffee and stepped onto the driveway. The stars hung over Silver Ridge like new promises. My phone buzzed a message from Harper. "Harper, nice work. Clean takedown. Community owes you. ME. They don't owe me, they owe themselves. Harper, you ever think about coming back? ME, no. I think about staying human." I put the phone away and stared down the quiet street. In the faint reflection of my window, I saw the man I used to be the one who chased criminals across borders. Then I saw the man I'd become, the one who finally found peace behind a garage door. Both versions nodded at each other in understanding. Then I pressed the remote. The door rolled down slowly, sealing away the past and the evidence and the ghosts of arrogance. The motor hummed steady and sure until it clicked shut. For the first time, the sound didn't mean defense. It meant closure. Silver Ridge slept easy that night, and for once so did I. The sound of justice isn't the clang of a gavel or the click of handcuffs. It's quieter paper sliding into folders, signatures drying in blue ink, the hum of truth finally filling the space where lies used to live. That's what Silver Ridge felt like in the weeks after Karen Holbrook's downfall. An entire community learning what silence really sounds like. She didn't go quietly. People like her rarely do. Even from county detention, she kept up her performance, mailing handwritten statements to the HOA board, claiming she was the victim of a targeted political smear by a federal operative with a personal vendetta. She accused me of hacking her computer, of planting evidence, even of harboring resentment toward women in positions of authority. I'd read worse. What mattered wasn't what she said, it was what the evidence said louder. The investigation that started in my garage had become a multi-state financial case. Harper's team traced funds from the Ridgewell Order to 3 other HOAs across the Southwest, each with its own president connected to the same network. What we'd uncovered wasn't just neighborhood corruption. It was a laundering ring hiding behind the most boring disguise imaginable: suburban order. You don't hide crime in chaos, you hide it in rules. The DOJ sent me weekly updates out of courtesy, though technically I was still on sabbatical. Karen's arraignment drew local media and 3 network reporters hungry for the words FBI director victimizes HOA president, but the headline never came. Instead, they ran with the truth. Suburban HOA exposed as front for fraudulent charity network. When the footage aired, it was almost surreal, watching her orange jumpsuit hair frizzed under fluorescent lights, still trying to control the room. "This is all a misunderstanding," she told the cameras. "That man manipulated evidence. He's using his position to." The deputy shut the door before she finished. 3 weeks later, I was subpoenaed to testify at her preliminary hearing. I hadn't stepped inside a courtroom in nearly 2 years, but the smell never changes old paper aftershave tension. The judge was a calm woman with half-moon glasses and a tone that could slice through granite. Karen sat at the defense table, wrists chained, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness but still sharp. When she saw me walk in, her expression flickered between hatred and disbelief, like she was still convincing herself. This was all some nightmare that good posture could fix. The prosecutor, a young attorney named Mendoza, began simply. "Director Cole, can you tell the court why you began investigating Miss Holbrook?" "Because she called 911 on me for closing my own garage," I said, letting the irony breathe. The courtroom laughed softly. Even the judge smirked. Mendoza nodded. "And what did you discover as a result of that incident? That her 911 call wasn't the only false report she'd ever made." I outlined the timeline, the sealed records, the fraudulent transfers, the alias switch, the digital evidence, the tracker. I spoke calmly, not as the man she'd antagonized, but as the professional I'd spent decades becoming. The facts did the talking. Karen tried to interrupt twice. Once she yelled, "He's lying," the judge warned her. The second time she stood up mid-sentence shouting, "You don't know what they did to me," her attorney tugged her back down like a handler with an angry showdog. When it was over, the judge thanked me for my clarity and dismissed the court until sentencing. Karen stared at me as they led her away. Her voice was smaller now, cracking. "You ruined everything." "No," I said softly. "You did." The sentence came 2 months later, 8 years for fraud, identity theft, and obstruction. No bail. Restitution of $92,000 to the HOA and $28 0 federal fines. Probation for 5 years after release. It wasn't revenge, it was arithmetic. The community moved on slowly, like a wound, learning how to scar. Some neighbors repainted their houses. Others stopped locking their mailboxes. The sense of paranoia she'd cultivated began to fade, replaced by small acts of rebellion that felt like freedom. Kids playing basketball after 9 p.m. Lawn chairs left out, overnight music at barbecues turned up just a little too loud. Priya, now officially HOA president, implemented Open Books Fridays, where anyone could come review financial records with free coffee and no fear. The first week, no one showed. By the third half, the block came. Transparency had become the new rebellion. She asked me to join the board. I declined again, but I helped quietly reviewing policy drafts, mediating disputes, setting up cybersecurity for HOA systems. "Consider it pro bono," I said. "Federal rehab therapy." But even peace comes with echoes. One afternoon, a plain manila envelope appeared in my mailbox, no return address. Inside, a single photograph, Karen standing beside a man in a black suit outside a charity gala bannered with Sunline Community Initiative. Scribbled on the back were 2 words, "Still missing." I sent it straight to Harper. Within hours, he called back. "The guy next to her, that's Richard Hale. Former accountant for Ridgewell Order, skipped his trial in 2010. Been off the radar ever since. You think she was still working with him, wouldn't surprise me. These people recycle identities like paper towels. We'll dig." The thought left a chill I hadn't felt in years. It meant the network was larger than we'd uncovered, maybe even national. Harper wanted me to come back full-time. I told him I'd think about it. That night I sat in my garage again. The Norton gleamed in silence, but I couldn't focus on it. The air smelled different, colder, more alert. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe instinct, but I could feel eyes on the house. Old habits die hard. I checked the motion cameras and the perimeter. Nothing. Still, I knew better than to assume nothing meant safety. I opened the photo again, studying the faint reflection in the gala window. A third person barely visible watching from across the street, too blurry to identify. I scanned the image, ran facial recognition, no match, just another ghost. The next morning, Harper emailed, "We're reopening the Ridgewell file. If you're willing, we could use your insight." I looked at the message for a long time. I'd left that life for a reason. I'd traded classified missions for coffee and sunlight. Yet here it was again, darkness knocking politely at my white picket fence. Maybe peace wasn't a place. Maybe it was just a pause between duties. Karen's sentencing day drew a crowd. Reporters filled the steps of the courthouse microphones, hungry for redemption soundbites. I stayed in the back hat low, letting the scene play without me. When they brought her out shackled but defiant, she still managed to look directly at one of the cameras. "I'll rebuild," she said. "People like me always do." She wasn't wrong. That's what worried me. Harper later confirmed they found a coded notebook in her safe lists of contacts, payments, symbols, matching other pending investigations. She'd been deeper in the network than anyone guessed. But at least for now, the web had a hole in it. Life in Silver Ridge settled again, though normal had changed definition. One evening, Priya organized a community dinner to celebrate the HOA's new charter, one that limited presidential authority and required every rule to pass majority approval. I went mostly out of curiosity. Kids chased fireflies. Someone grilled hot dogs. Laughter replaced tension. When Priya handed me the microphone, I hesitated. "I'm not much for speeches," I began, "but I will say this rules are supposed to protect, not control. We forget that when fear wears a friendly face. Karen used rules to build a cage around this neighborhood. You tore it down. That's what matters." They clapped. I stepped back relieved. Later that night, as I walked home under the lamplight, I saw Leonard sitting on his porch with a cigar. He waved me over. "You ever regret getting involved?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said honestly. "Peace costs more than you think." He nodded. "But it's worth the receipt." "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "It usually is." A week later, I received a call from Harper. "Update on our missing accountant," he said. "Hale's dead, found in an abandoned warehouse in Phoenix. Gunshot wound, no sign of struggle. My pulse didn't change." I'd been expecting something like that, and Karen, she doesn't know yet. But if this was a cleanup job, she'll never get the chance to rebuild. The network eats its own. "Good," I said softly. After we hung up, I went outside. The night breeze was sharp, clean. The kind of silence that follows justice, heavy but earned. In the distance, the streetlights hummed. I took a deep breath and smiled. Maybe now, finally, the storm had passed. The maple tree rustled overhead. I looked up at its branches, remembering the first day I met her, the pink blazer, the camera, the arrogance. All of it gone, now folded into history like an old violation notice. I pressed the remote. The garage door began to close, its echo rolling out across the quiet cul-de-sac. "Order restored," I murmured, and this time it wasn't irony, it was peace. 6 months passed. Spring came back to Silver Ridge Estates like a shy apology grass, a little greener fences, freshly painted laughter returning to the sidewalks where paranoia used to live. The neighborhood had found its rhythm again. HOA meetings were shorter, friendlier, and filled with more coffee than confrontation. For once, bylaws sounded like background noise instead of threats. Sometimes when I'd walk my dog down Maple Court, I'd catch a neighbor's smile that lingered longer than usual, a small nod that said thank you for cleaning the rot without burning the house. I never corrected them. What I did wasn't heroism. It was maintenance, the same kind I'd always done, just on a larger, messier engine. Karen Holman, was serving her sentence at a low-security federal facility in Kansas. The papers called her the HOA Queen of Fraud, and apparently she hated the title. Through the Bureau's grapevine, I learned she'd already tried to manipulate other inmates into starting a community improvement committee. Some people just can't retire from control. But her story didn't end there, and neither did mine. One afternoon, Harper called from D.C. His voice carried that particular tone, half respect, half trouble. "Cole," he said, "remember that Ridgewell order accountant, Richard Hale? The dead one, yeah. Turns out he wasn't working alone. The network's bigger than we thought. They were using HOAs all over the country, tiny ones like yours, to funnel microtransactions that went unnoticed by regulators. Low risk, high efficiency. So Karen was just one gear." "Exactly. And that gear squealed. We've got warrants in 3 more states now. Your evidence started a chain reaction." I stared at the phone for a moment, the hum of my garage fan filling the silence. "You're welcome," I said dryly. He laughed. "You sure you don't want back in desk work advisory role? You could train the next batch of agents." "I've trained enough people to know I'd rather talk to engines," I said. "But send me the files. I'll take a look." That evening I sat at my workbench again, the place where everything started. The Norton sat fully restored now, every bolt shining like it had been waiting for this ending. I turned on the small radio. The old jazz station came through, fuzzy but warm. Outside, the sky was the color of cooling steel. As I tightened the final screw on the bike, my mind wandered back to Karen, her voice, her posture, her unwavering belief that control meant safety. I used to think people like her were the villains of small worlds, the petty tyrants who needed fences more than empathy. But now I understood she wasn't a monster. She was a symptom. There's something about power that makes people forget why they wanted it. At first, it's about fixing things, tidying lawns, improving property values, protecting the community. But somewhere along the way, they start believing the rules are holy, that disobedience equals sin. Karen didn't want order. She wanted worship. And when worship didn't come, she built her own religion fear. The irony was almost biblical. She'd tried to weaponize a garage door, and it ended with the FBI walking through hers. Silver Ridge changed in ways I hadn't expected. Without Karen, people talked more. We had block parties again. Leonard started a Fix-It Friday, where neighbors brought broken appliances to my garage, and I helped them repair whatever they could carry. It wasn't about the repairs, it was about restoring trust. The place that once caused suspicion had become the community's heartbeat. Priya made good on her promises too. She pushed through a neighbor mediation policy, replaced fines with community service, and created an anonymous hotline for complaints that actually led to dialogue instead of punishment. It worked. People stopped whispering about each other and started helping instead. The best part, the new HOA motto carved into the clubhouse wall, "Order without fear." Every time I walked past it, I couldn't help but smile. Then one morning I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter handwritten on prison stationery. The return address made my stomach tighten: Federal Correctional Institute, Topeka. Inside was a single page in sharp, slanted handwriting. "Daniel, I hope you're satisfied. You humiliated me, destroyed everything I built, and left me to rot among people beneath me. But you should know something: I didn't start Ridgewell's game. I ended it once. They pulled me back. You think you stopped a crime, but you only clipped a branch. The roots are still growing. When I'm out, I'll finish what I started. K. No threats, no apologies. Just venom disguised as prophecy." I folded the letter, neatly placed it in a folder labeled Archive, and slid it into the filing cabinet beside my workbench. Fear thrives on attention. I wasn't giving it any. Still, part of me knew she was right about one thing: the roots did go deeper. The next day I called Harper. She wrote to me, I said. "Let me guess, cryptic threats, self-pity prophecy, pretty much." "Good. That means she's scared. We've already frozen every known Ridgewell account. She's got nowhere to go when she gets out, except back to her own reflection," I said. He chuckled. "Keep that poetic streak, Cole. We'll need it when we make the movie. God help them if they cast someone handsome." We laughed, and for a moment the tension broke. Months later, the Bureau invited me to speak at Quantico, a closed session for new agents on the psychology of deception. I almost declined, but Harper insisted. "You've earned a few students," he said. Standing in front of that class, looking at those young faces full of adrenaline and certainty, I told them what Karen had reminded me of. "Most criminals don't start as criminals," I said. "They start as people who think they're fixing something the world broke. They convince themselves that cutting corners is just efficiency, that lying is strategy, and that control is safety. But every shortcut costs a piece of your soul. By the time you realize how much you've paid, the receipt is already stamped." The room was silent. I ended with a small smile. "And remember this: sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. Listen carefully." When I returned home, Silver Ridge was bathed in golden evening light. The kids were setting up lemonade stands. Neighbors were chatting on porches. For the first time in a long while, it felt like America, the one we promise ourselves, still exists, somewhere between fences and forgiveness. I stood in my driveway, mug of coffee in hand, watching the maple tree rustle. It had grown a bit taller, casting longer shadows across the asphalt. Life goes on quietly, persistently, beautifully. Inside the garage, the Norton sat gleaming, ready for its first real ride. I slipped on my leather gloves, swung my leg over the seat, and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, steady, strong, clean. I rode through Silver Ridge, slowly passing houses that looked brighter than I remembered. At the end of the cul-de-sac, a sign caught my eye: Community Open House, all welcome. Karen would have hated that word welcome. It was too uncontrollable, too democratic. The thought made me laugh. When I reached the main road, I stopped for a moment, looking back at the neighborhood that had tested and taught me more than any federal operation ever had. I'd come here for peace, and ended up rediscovering purpose. Funny how the two can overlap when you least expect it. Then I whispered, "Permission granted," and opened the throttle. The road stretched ahead, wide and waiting. Sometimes life puts you face to face with people who thrive on power, rules, and fear. They'll try to control you, intimidate you, or make you question your right to peace. Don't let them. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand. Justice isn't revenge, it's responsibility. It's documenting the facts, staying calm under pressure, and believing that doing the right thing doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. If you've ever dealt with your own HOA, Karen, remember patience is a weapon and integrity is armor. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and share your own story about standing up to injustice. Don't forget to subscribe for more true inspired HOA dramas, because sometimes the quietest garage hides the loudest truth.